American border agents are on high alert after a warning of possible attacks from the other side of the border.
Agents have been warned to stay alert, wear ballistic armor, carry long guns, and work in teams.
So U.S. Marines are now at the southern border, locking it down completely so that nothing gets through. However, doing this has only angered Mexico's cartels, who were making billions off America's wide open front door, which is why they're now making plans to engage in combat with our troops and law enforcement officers. But that might be a bad idea, because the border is about to experience a U.S. military response unlike anything we've ever seen.
Now to a violent new threat at our southern border. Cartels employing new tech to target their rivals as well as border agents. They're using weaponized explosive drones as bombs.
Migrant after migrant, all trying to evade Border Patrol agents.
The two migrant groups just made a hole in the border wall. It's dark out, so what they don't realize, we're 5 miles away and can still watch their every move.
New York Post reports that illegal border crossings have fallen to near record lows. Trump administration on pace to see the fewest crossings in 60 years.
I've been down here for nearly 4 years, and not once was I really concerned for my safety, but I actually just got protective gear from our network because things are getting a little unprecedented down here. The cartel is operating in ways that we have not seen before. They're desperate. They're a $13 billion a year industry moving people in the country.
We are witnessing in real time how cartels and transnational gangs on the southern border aren't just trafficking humans anymore. They are actively trying to target U.S. law enforcement. And that memo suggesting that they may be trying to create bigger chaos.
So 93% less people are now sneaking into the country and evading Border Patrol. A major accomplishment, yes, but what nobody's talking about is that this has enraged Mexico's cartels, which were making $13 billion a year smuggling everything into our country. And now these violent gangsters who've made bank fueling not just America's asylum crisis, but also America's chemical abuse crisis, wreaking havoc in major cities, will have a lot less to keep them busy, which experts say leaves them no option but to fight back. Something that's already happening on a smaller scale, with Border Patrol agents being targeted by these cartels in several incidents over the last year. But now, this entire situation is about to change for the worse, because if you take billions in dollars away from gang members sporting military-grade equipment who've taken over entire swaths of Mexico, they're probably not gonna just surrender and go get real jobs. Which brings us to the real reason why the US military is being sent to the southern border, with special forces being deployed into Mexico. Everybody expects the cartels to fight back against this. But the Marines are getting ready for what comes next, which could be assaults on the border by armed cartel members, or targeted attacks against Border Patrol agents by snipers, who we're now learning are more heavily armed than most people even realize.
They're actually using drones to drop explosives on rival cartel members, or even the military, even explosives that are laid on the ground as far as IEDs.
So those troops, those were not the Mexican military. Those are the cartels. They're essentially a rogue army deployed to the Mexican side of the border. And experts say there's a good chance this army is ready for war. In fact, they're already at war with themselves and with the Mexican government, and it's feared they soon may be at war with US law enforcement, creating a situation so unpredictably dangerous that reporters are now being issued body armor. And as you're about to see, our troops may now face battlefield threats they've never seen before.
So they're getting desperate. So we got our hands on some video, that video showing the cartel quite literally dropping a bomb.
Crazy. So these cartels, they have been making massive amounts of money off the opportunity at America's border, which was previously wide open, but now that's over. And their business is now toast, but they're not gonna accept that. The New York Post is calling them kamikaze drones. Here's a photo of a drone like this being used in Ukraine right now. Look at that thing. The bomb is bigger than the drone.
Now with these drones that have the capabilities of actually dropping explosives, it really shows how much more these cartels have evolved, and the threat level has increased even more so now.
It's crazy. So before we get into how President Trump and our military are going to stand up against this threat and defeat it, it's important to understand that these drones and this technology, this is a new thing in modern warfare, and it's changing the face of battlefields all over the place. First of all, these things are incredibly inexpensive. They make it very unsafe to be on a battlefield. You can't hide in a trench because these things drop items on top of you. On top of that, tanks, armored vehicles, most of these have weaker armor in areas that traditional weapons that would hit them in the front might not be able to reach, like the roof or the back. And unless you're gonna fight fire with fire, there's really no way law enforcement's gonna be able to stand up against this. Apparently they've got spy planes that are now flying over the border, keeping an eye on things in a way that's never been done before. And using high-tech surveillance equipment like this is gonna help the US military find these drone operators, find these cartel members, catch them as they're sneaking around, plotting to ambush our troops and our law enforcement officers as they keep America safe.
Along the southern border this morning, signs of President Trump's long-promised crackdown on immigration as the 1,500 troops sent to the border begin their new mission. In the air and on the ground.
This is a full-blown military occupation of the U.S. border. This is crazy. You can even see the border wall behind them, but that's not enough. They need troops and tanks. And if you're a cartel member, the sight and sound of military vehicles in the skies and on the ground on the U.S. side will definitely throw a wrench in your plans. Because these cartels, they bring products into the country, which are illegal, and they bring people into the country illegally, which is how they make money. But you can't do that if there's a massive presence on the other side of a border wall that's looking at you 24 hours a day, whether it's daytime or nighttime, and is ready to stop you. Then it seems to be working. It says right here, border crossings have hit record lows and could be on track to be at the lowest level they've ever been in 60 years. They're down more than 90% compared to February 2024. Look at this chart right here. This is crazy. The numbers of people that were coming in 2022 and 2023, that's nuts. And this has only taken about 3 weeks, something we were told was never gonna happen. And in the middle of the asylum crisis, America was told that we had the most secure border we've ever had and that everything that could possibly be done to keep it safe and to stop people coming across was already being done, but it looks like that wasn't exactly true now, was it?
The troops deployed to address what Trump has declared is a national emergency.
What exactly do you want them to be doing right now?
Making sure that the border is safe and secure and that criminals don't come into our country.
The surge in forces comes as the situation on the border has improved steadily since former President Biden announced new asylum restrictions last spring.
Oh, that's what did it.
Between Border Patrol and...
Yeah, that's what did it. The asylum restrictions, not the troops, not the tanks, not the massive military buildup, and border crossings started dropping even before Trump got into office. People knew that he was going to do something like this, and they said, you know what, it's not worth it. But as you're about to see, this might not be enough to stop these cartels, because they're not just going to sit around and lose billions of dollars and do nothing. They're going to take action, which is going to put everybody at risk, people in Mexico, people in America, especially those down at the border right now trying to stop these guys. So here, Border Patrol agents have discovered a smuggling tunnel that went underneath border security measures. Look at this thing. Apparently it was held up by just wooden beams. It was incredibly dangerous. Here you can see the troops checking it out. And you know what's surprising about this is that these cartels were even able to dig such a tunnel. I mean, there are underground listening devices, which can be used to pick up excavation-related activity. You can see them carrying bags of stuff out of this place right now and handing it over. That's evidence of some sort. Who knows what they had in that tunnel or who they had in that tunnel. But this just goes to show you how sophisticated this rogue army is and what they're willing to do to continue bringing things into our country that shouldn't be here. Not just people, not just products, but also things that could be used to harm those of us who live here and which fall into the hands of gang members, which they then use to coerce and exploit their fellow immigrants in the very communities they come here and try to embed themselves with. And what's truly shocking is that it looks like this army that is south of the border is trying to move some sort of army or military presence into this country.
This was in the desert near Y, Arizona. Now, sheriffs down here along the southern border and other law enforcement, they have their eyes not only on what's coming in, but also what is coming out. Here's why, because they know that when they see guns and money coming out of the country going towards Mexico, that means whatever the cartels were moving into the country, they were successful. Take a listen.
These are all American weapons.
All these weapons coming through, all that money coming through, is that they were successful, and with that money, they're buying things for them.
So right there, all of the stuff that's coming across the border, the stuff that gets confiscated and that gets taken out, that's alarming to people that are watching this because this is just a small portion of what's actually coming through, the stuff that gets caught. There's a larger amount of stuff that's already here floating around in the hands of the wrong people. But all of those weapons, they didn't get into our country for free. What on earth could those be used for? Who paid for them to come in here? The Mexican cartels don't need it. After all, they're the ones selling it. Somebody else needs all those weapons. But the the other part of stopping these cartels is stopping what may be accomplished by their nefarious activities inside this country, because some of what they're doing does get through.
Target's coming out the house.
ICE enforcement and removal operations officers have been watching his movements and patterns for days now. The suspect, an illegal migrant from Mexico, convicted in 2004 for alien smuggling and already removed from the U.S. in 2005, but snuck back in.
These are the kinds of people that we're at war with, both outside of the border and inside of our country. This guy's already been kicked out of the country, but now he's back somehow. Could he have come in as a quote-unquote asylum seeker under a false identity? We know that people did that who ended up being dangerous once they got here. But here's why it makes sense for the cartels to get their people back into the country. If they're bringing all of these weapons and all of these items in here, and those are going to be sold, who's going to make sure that that goes down the way it's supposed to? Who's going to make sure payment gets made? Who's going to keep an eye on all that stuff when it makes its way from the cartels and gang members to the other gang members that are here who are going to buy it and pick it up? People like this guy.
At our public safety threats or national security threats, they've had their due process. They've never shown up for deportation. Those are our primary targets right now.
How many people roughly are on this target list?
We've got multiple lists, so it's hard to say one specific number.
Dozens, hundreds in Houston?
On the list, thousands.
Thousands. Thousands of people like this are in our country right now who could be potentially dangerous, who could be affiliated with some of the worst criminal organizations on our entire planet. Now, thousands certainly isn't millions, but it's important to understand that just a small handful of people, they can cause a lot of problems. Look at this. The NYPD has identified 41 members of Tren de Aragua, this Venezuelan gang. But look at this. They've been busted nearly 150 times. Arrests are up 45% because of the presence of 41 people. And here's why that is. Look, they can recruit new members, which they're doing inside New York City's shelter system. This is a gang of kids that live in the Roosevelt Hotel, a building that just so happens to be the welcome center for asylum seekers in New York. So if you're an asylum seeker, you come to New York, the first place you go is infested by gang members who are recruiting. That's a great situation. If you're a criminal, and look at this, 10 of these guys were busted for selling weapons, the same types of weapons that these cartels are now bringing into our country. AR-15 assault rifles, modified handguns, and these weapons that the cartels are bringing into our country, they're being specifically used by the worst people who are in our country and shouldn't be here to grow their criminal operations. They need these weapons to coerce people to join their gangs. They need these weapons to push out rival gangs and exert their influence over territory, which they've invaded.
Once they commit their crimes, they go back to the migrant community where they assimilate themselves with people that are actually here obeying the laws.
The NYPD is cracking down on Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang they say is living in the shelter system and recruiting children.
We have 39 members of TDA that have been identified, and we have an additional 4 members that have been identified of a subgroup called the Little Devils of 42nd Street.
42nd Street.
Yeah, those are much younger kids.
And those are just the members police have been able to...
So at the time of this report, the number of known gang members was just 39 people. 39 people is all it took to start growing a criminal empire inside New York City shelters, which are supposed to help people, but they don't do any vetting, and they don't let police inside. We're a sanctuary city, so these criminals, they just took these places over with weapons they're getting from these cartels.
Undocumented criminals as young as 11 years old are carrying out retail robberies and committing crimes on scooters, snatching people's jewelry, watches, and cell phones at gunpoint and knife point. Over 300 incidents last year, more than 800 so far this year. They've brazenly...
Okay, so this is what a small handful of people does. And the NYPD, God bless them, but they don't have a clue how many of these gang members are out there. How can they when none of these people were properly vetted before being allowed in the first place? This gang is like a tree. You've got the branches that are sprouting out of the ground, but you have no idea how deep the roots actually go and how deep this gang's tentacles are wrapped around the internal workings of the criminal underworld in our city. And it looks like there's a small army of criminals now operating in America, especially in some of our sanctuary cities. But in order to stop a small army of criminals from getting here and arming itself, you've got to stop an army outside of America's border from doing the groundwork for all of this to happen, something that they've been allowed to do for far too long.
And while this directive was just issued, officials in Texas have already been bracing for a fallout. A few days ago, Lieutenant Christopher Oliveras with Texas DPS told News Nation that as enforcement wraps up, cartels will fight to protect their smuggling route. So what's really interesting, Nicole, is I spent many years reporting on the southern border on the Mexican side.
So these cartels, they are so bad and so heavily armed, you've got to have an all-out response if you want to stop these guys. Just telling them not to come to the border or expecting that Mexico is going to be able to handle this on their own, that's ridiculous. Mexico hasn't been able to handle these guys on their own. That's why they're here in the first place. And look at this. They've even infiltrated U.S. law enforcement. A Customs and Border Patrol officer was just arrested for human smuggling. Apparently, he was in league with these cartels. And he was paid $2,500 for each person he brought into the country. But at the same time, President Trump, the border czar, they are not playing around. Not only are they deploying as much as they possibly can in the way of resources to the border, but they're doing internal investigations to root out those who are criminals and who are standing against an agenda that will keep our country safe and secure. But what do you think? Is the U.S. going to be able to put a stop to this? Or will it only be temporary? In 4 years, when we've got another president, is all of this going to change? Are the cartels just going to wait it out? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.